hello everybody. My name's Marnie, and I'd like to welcome you to Frankston City Library's FrankTALK with Julietta Henderson. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Frankston City Libraries operates, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to the elders of any other communities who may be joining us today. Now, Julietta Henderson is a brilliant new star of Australian fiction, and her debut novel is bound to bring a smile to readers' faces. The funny thing about Norman Foreman is an inspiring, feel-good novel about a small boy with a big heart, a woman who would do anything for her son, and a journey that will change their lives. Julietta, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Marnie. It's lovely to be here.
Now, the funny thing about Norman Foreman, it's an absolutely delightful read. We were just saying off air, I finished it this morning. Where did the story of Sadie and Norman start for you?
Well, physically, it actually started in Penzance, where the story starts. I was there for a few months writing something very different, which is still somewhere hiding in the bottom of my computer. And I think it was, at first, I think it was the actual location of Penzance that got me thinking about a story. And then one day, these two characters literally just appeared in my head, which was Sadie and Norman. And the story sort of came up around them as characters rather than an idea of, oh, let's do a story about a boy going to the Edinburgh Fringe. It was more, the more I thought about them, the more I sort of fell in love with the characters. And the story did just build itself from them. And I think the very first question that I remember asking myself was, what would happen if the worst time in your life could actually turn into the best time of your life? And that's kind of what happens in the story.
Absolutely. And I did notice, like, obviously the funny thing about Norman Foreman being the title, I've got the book up there. Now we do talk about on the cover, how can he make them laugh if he's forgotten how to smile? So while initially it looks like a, quite humorous book, it's actually a story really about dealing with grief on many different levels, from a child's perspective, from mum's perspective. What drew you to writing about grief? And I've probably simplified it a little bit, but it's essentially a funny book about grief.
Yeah, and I don't think anything in particular, I don't have any sense of sadness and wanting to write about grief particularly. But what I do really like the idea of is the correlation between sadness and humour, and how, the healing power of humour and we all have to go through grief. And so, back to that question that I asked myself was, what if that terrible time could actually lead, that something good would come out of such a terrible time? And it is pretty awful to throw that much grief at a child. And it's not a spoiler to say that a child dies in the first couple of pages. And that doesn't sound very uplifting, but it's what goes on from then. And it's how as mother and son, they both, I guess, help each other get through the grief. Sadie thinks she's helping Norman, but actually Norman's just as much helping Sadie. And it's just as much Sadie's story as it is Norman's story, despite it being called The Funny Thing About Norman Foreman. And Norman, of course, is very charming and everyone's very charmed by Norman. But I do like to say that it's just as much Sadie's story.
I would completely agree with you on that one. And I did note in those first couple of chapters where we're introduced to Sadie and Norman, we are at Jax's funeral. Yeah. So again, that's no spoilers there. That is the fact. But what I loved is that you didn't actually, I guess, harp on. It's a bad way of saying it, but you didn't harp on about what actually happened to Jax. We know what happened to Jax. It was more about the effect on Norman and the importance of their relationship as best mates. And I think one of my favourite lines in the book is later on when Sadie's standing there and she said, my two best mates.
Yeah.
And so it's moved from, Norman and his best mate to they're actually my best mates. And I feel like there was quite a self-discovery for Sadie in the book.
Yeah, definitely. As she's a single mother, and so her whole world is Norman. But when Jax came into their world, he became, not a son, but a friend, as you said. And when I was writing, Jax was never going to be, he was going to be dead right from the beginning, which is a terrible thing to say, but sorry. But it was always my intention to have him as a really large character all the way through, and hopefully I've achieved that. And that's, because that's what the whole story pins on, basically, is them trying to honour, or Norman trying to honour Jax, Sadie trying to help Norman get through the grief over losing Jax. And, really the whole idea of the comedy thing was for Jax, was his idea, it was partly his idea. And so, getting them there to the fringe was his dream as well. And that's what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I must say, the way I related to Sadie so much as a single mother. And I think I can hear my daughter, I think she's making Milo in the kitchen right now. But I could see myself in Sadie constantly worrying about whether she's a good mother. And my biggest learning is, if you worry about being a good mother, it means you actually are one, because you're considerate of that fact. And I think one of my favorite lines from Sadie, and it's paraphrasing because there's a bit left out of it, but she said, even if it goes to hell in a handbasket, you've just got to keep going.
Yeah.
And I think that's true as a parent, let alone a single mother.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because I'm not a parent. And a lot of people have said to me, oh, you've got, especially mothers have said, oh, you've really gotten it down pat, that feeling of being an adult, how would you do that? And I don't think you necessarily, well, clearly not, but you don't need to be a mother to understand the challenges of being a single mother, or a mother in general. And I've got a sister with children. I've got a lot of friends with children. So, I've seen how it goes, and I see the worry, and, I can sort of sit back from it and go, gosh, it must be really worrying being a mother. And then I can swoop in and be the fun auntie or fun friend and things.
That's it.
But it does make me really happy when people, especially single mothers, have said to me, you really captured that. So that's good. I did my job well there.
You definitely hit the nail on the head. Now, I am interested to know, what kind of challenges did you encounter while you were writing your characters, especially one like Norman, given his age and his complexities? Because we never really talk about what's going on for Norman, just that he doesn't quite fit in.
The challenges as a writer, for me, the main challenge was getting the dialogue right, or the feeling of the dialogue right for Norman, because I didn't want it to be, it's not a children's book or a YA book or anything like that. But when you put a 12-year-old in a book, it immediately changes the whole sort of ambience of it. So it was quite, it wasn't really difficult. It was just interesting, very interesting. And I worked quite hard on trying to make Norman believable. So that was hard. And also trying to get into the head of a 12-year-old boy. I mean, I've known a lot of 12-year-old boys, but I don't think I've known any 12-year-old boy with as many problems as Norman, which is probably just as well. But, as a writer, I think that's what you do, is you want to throw as much as you can at your characters and see how they get out of it. And I think I threw a lot at Norman, and I guess that's how you grow the character as well, because I did throw these big things at him, and it was a testament to his character, or who he became, that he did overcome them. And it was fun. It was fun because, when you're writing away and you're thinking, yeah, but would that really happen? Or how can you do that to a kid? You're like, oh, well, you're writing it. You can do whatever you like. And as long as it works and you're kind and you're realistic and you're, mindful of doing the right thing, I think you can do anything.
No, I agree. And I'm really curious to know, like, it's not often that you pick up a book and really love all of the characters. And that's what happened for me with your book. And I'm not sure if you're allowed to, but do you have a favorite character out of this one?
I'm sure I'm allowed to. Look, I do have a soft spot for Leonard. I do have a soft spot for Leonard because I actually had to fight quite hard to keep Leonard. So I've got, I mean, not as he is now, but when I very first wrote the book, there was a different character as well as Leonard in the book. And my agent, before it even went to publishers or editors to try and sell the book, we worked together for a few months, and she said, those two characters do the same job. And it was very hard for me to think about, and that was just because Leonard was who he was or whatever. That was the suggestion, was you might need to write him out, but I couldn't get rid of him, and instead I made him a bigger part and I got rid of the other guy. So but yeah, I think I really do have a soft spot for Leonard, but probably only marginally more than Sadie and Norman. I like them all. I even like Adam. I don't know if you liked Adam, but I even like him.
I, I, Adam, I think it was a bit like Sadie. I didn't quite know how to take him.
Yeah.
In the, by the end, yes, I did. I had a very, very soft spot for Adam. And it made me realize how sad someone can be on the inside.
Yeah.
And want something that they can possibly never have. So it's not giving anything away.
Adam was actually a lot worse to start off with. But we did have to make him have some redeeming features, because I don't know that there's a point in putting a character in if they don't sort of progress or become better in some way, or worse, but change in some way. So rather than make him even worse, I gave him a couple of redeeming things. I don't know if they quite worked, but if he really...
No, there was some that I was like, "You right, mate?" And there's others that I was like, "Oh, that's sad." Like, I don't know if other people are picking up on it, but that's sad. I must say the biggest thing I took out of your book was the whole, it takes a village to raise a child, is also what I took out of that. So Leonard coming on board, I felt like we had son, mother, but we had a grandfather figure, and then we get uncle figures and we get auntie figures. And it was just, by the end, it wasn't all on Sadie's shoulders. And I think that's something that mums put on themselves, and parents, like single dads as well, put on themselves. And that it's okay to reach out, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to create a safety net, which is what Norman created for himself, really, because he's such a charismatic boy.
Yeah, and I really like that idea, and that was the general idea. I mean, you'll see that done in a lot of novels. It's like creating, I think it's called a found family, but it's like, collecting these people around you that you replace what you don't have. And obviously Leonard was a figure for both Sadie and Norman and all the others, that could or might be his father and things like that. They all play their part, and they all, we won't give too much away, but they all play their part, and yeah, he does kind of collect the people along the way, just simply because of who he is. And also,
absolutely,
Sadie is as well. She doesn't think so, but people are attracted to her as well, because she's a great person regardless of what she thinks.
That's it. And she's a great mum. Like,
Yeah.
the way she got behind Norman, Jax, the plan, it was absolutely fantastic. Even being there for Leonard, she's just a support to everybody. I just wish she could be more of a support to herself as a character.
Yeah, and she's, she can't see beyond. She just thinks she's so flawed, and she is, but she can't see beyond her flaws. But the journey, as in any road trip novel, it's a physical journey, but it's also an emotional journey. And so along the way, she's able to discover things about herself as well. And, especially that she could even do it. Like, she wouldn't have thought weeks before it happened, she would never even have dreamed that she could do something like this. But just simply because of all she's trying to do is make Norman happy again, and she doesn't know how to do it. And she comes upon accidentally this way of doing it, and so it doesn't matter what it's going to cost her emotionally, she decides she's going to do it. And yes, I guess that's the mark of a good mum.
Yeah, and I enjoyed this book on audiobook. We were discussing off air, I'm an extremely slow reader. So for me, if it's not on audio, when I can listen to it stacking the dishwasher or cooking dinner or on my walk, then it's probably going to take a year for me to read the book. Now, you have Catherine Parkinson as the narrator, and I must say she was absolutely magnificent. And I think audiobooks have this whole other element to novel writing that is an acting and performance angle. And I think Catherine she changed her voice for each character. We knew who we were listening to. She did a fantastic job. What was the process like as an author going through that audiobook process? Because we don't often hear about that.
No, and this is one of the best things that's happened for this whole book deal publishing kind of thing, is that years ago, I can't even remember how many now, 5, when I first started writing the book, I don't think all authors do, but I am obviously a sort of person that I need a face to write to, whether it's someone famous or whatever. And I always used to like Catherine Parkinson. I mean, she's not hugely well known, but she's very well known in the UK. she was on Doc Martin, and she's currently, they're probably old episodes, on the IT Crowd, which is showing over here. And I always liked her as an actress because she's really quirky and she's got a really distinctive voice. I don't even know what part, to be honest, I don't even know what part of the UK she comes from, but she's got that sort of every woman voice, but it's with a very quirky tone or intonation or whatever. Anyway, I didn't even think about that when I was writing. I just wanted a face. And so right from the word go, the minute I started writing this book, in my head was Catherine Parkinson, which is amazing. And then when I was in the UK last year and they said, oh, we're casting the audiobook, do you have any ideas or whatever? And I said, oh, well, I told them that story. And the next minute, there she was agreeing to do it, which was a dream come true. And interestingly, as I just said to you off air, I'm only halfway through the audiobook myself, because I have to be honest, I didn't know that it was being released at the same time as the Australian one. I thought it was being held back for the UK release, which is in April. And then my niece actually texted me and she sent me this soundbite. She said, look what I'm listening to. And I was like, how did you get that? What do you mean? I just downloaded it from Apple Books. So I'm about halfway through it. And I was very nervous because I didn't know how she was going to handle it, because originally there was going to be someone else reading for Norman. And then when she started her parts, she actually contacted them and asked them to ask me if she could do both parts, because she really thought she could do it and she wanted to do it. And I said, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So, and she did. And I absolutely love, like I say, I'm only halfway through it. But I sort of, when I put my headphones in when I first started, I was like, and as soon as she started, I was, oh, wow, she's done such an amazing job. And it is pretty weird for me to think that she is who I wrote to, and now she's actually, which is, I would never have dreamed that would happen. I didn't even know about audiobooks, I don't think. So, and also my own audiobook is the first audiobook I've ever listened to. So I might have to get into them more.
I have to say you've started on a good one, because as I said, Catherine has done an absolutely amazing job. I've listened to some shockers. Yeah. So this is absolutely wonderful. And she really does act out the story. As I said, she's got different accents, different voices for each character, and you know who you're listening to at any one time. So she's done a marvelous job. So it's a great choice.
Yeah, it's kind of like, because when they were going to cast a boy, because I hadn't listened to audiobooks before, I didn't know what the process was, whether it was someone narrating a book or whether they did it like a play or something like that. And so that's how it would have been, I guess, when they use different voices, it's more like a radio play or something. But I think with one person reading it, it's like someone reading you a bedtime story or something like that, because it's the same person, but they're making a big effort to change the voices and change the tone and make it into a story for you. And so, yeah, I'm so glad you loved it, and I'll continue on my walk this evening. I'll continue to listen to it.
Excellent. And I must say, for anyone watching today, we actually have it on audiobook on the CD. So we've got it on disc at the library. But you're right, it's great on your walk, or when you hop into bed and your eyes are just so tired that you can't quite read the book, or you're falling asleep halfway through the first page. It's great to just pop it on for 30 minutes and pop the timer on it, and it just off it goes as you go to sleep. So I'm a big fan. I'm a converted as well in the last 18 months.
It's daunting though when you see the file and it says 8 hours and 40 minutes or something, and you're like, what happened?
It could be worse. I picked up Barack Obama's and it's 29 hours. So and that's just volume 1.
I think they need to leave that off, because how can you do that? Because I read in one sitting or 2 sittings. When I start a book, everything else goes out the window and I have to just read the whole thing, which is why I have to set aside times to read, or read in the middle of the night or something. But yeah, I don't know that you could listen to I guess you could if you were doing your housework or something. You could listen to something in a whole day. I don't know.
That's it. Well, I do. Quite often I'll be painting or I'll be sewing, and I will pop it in and 6 hours will go past and you've almost finished the book. So, which Barack, I pick up and put him down often. He'll take me all year, I think. Now, I would like to know, you said you'd been working on this one for a little while. How long did it take you to get that first draft down?
50 years. I'm not even joking. No, I am joking. Look, I would say if I took away the times that I stopped, which I stopped for probably a couple of years in between, probably 2 years. You know, I work as well, and I write for a living, so it's only an excuse, but it's actually quite hard to get into a creative sort of headspace to write when you've got to write, you know, marketing copy or real estate copy or, you know, resumes or whatever. So I tend to put aside blocks of time, or I tended to put aside blocks of time and, you know, do it then and say, well, I've got 2 days, I'm just going to do that. But I did work out fairly quickly that that's just another form of procrastination, and you really do have to exercise the writing thing, and you have to get in there, and whether it's like 10 minutes a day or 10 hours a day, I think well, I'm taking my own advice from here on in, because book 2 is, I've got a contract for book 2, so it's a bit of a different situation now. But yeah, I would say it took me 2 years. But
I'm always curious, once you have that contract for another book, how does your approach change? Does it affect your creativity?
it doesn't affect creativity, but it affects your stress levels. No, I wouldn't even call it stress levels, because they're very understanding, and they, you know, I have the best publishers and editor and agent and everything, and there's no pressure, really. There's no pressure. I mean, maybe if I was, you know, someone famous, there might be more pressure, because a lot of people that are very prolific put out a book every year. And I was asked if that was something I wanted to do, and I said, oh yeah, I think so. And then someone else said to me, you know, who was in the industry, said, you know, it's probably better if you go for one every 18 months. So anyway, who knows what will happen. But it doesn't affect your creativity. In fact, I think for me, it's probably enhanced it, because instead of fluffing around and not having, you know, just saying, oh, I'm writing a book, and I was writing this book for nobody really, except for myself, because I think while you always would aspire, well, I always aspired to get published, you have to finish a book first. And while I've got a couple of other books that are finished in my head, but I know now that they're definitely not finished, and probably never will be. But I think when you've got something to write for, like I've got something to write for now. I've got people who have bought this book, and I've got, you know, people who now are looking for, you know, will be looking for something, hopefully, if they like it. And you know, the actual deadline thing, that's a big motivator. But it's a positive motivator, I think, because it's more, I think what it's done is made it more like a job for me.
Okay.
Than just fluffing around going, oh, I'm going to go to Paris for 3 months and write, and then go to Paris for 3 months and drink coffee instead.
Yeah.
Now I'd have to write. So I definitely write every day now, for the new book as well as work. And I try, and what it's done for me is I've made work my second priority, and luckily, hoping my bosses can't hear me. But and
I can understand it some days.
the book is my first priority. So it's been a positive, and you know, it's good.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it's had that effect, because I know, as well, I can say it now, a writer myself, not a published author, that yeah, when you're not writing for anyone in particular or to a particular timeline, I find the only time I write is when I'm booked on particular workshops. So I'll go to a workshop, or I'll go to Writers Club once a month, and for those hours I write the book. The rest of the time I'm writing for work or a client or whatever might be going on, or a not-for-profit, whatever I'm doing at the time. But there's always another priority. And I think having that deadline makes such a difference, and that contract, that you're right, that is your priority moving forward.
Yeah. And I think too, if you can make your own deadlines when you're writing, and of course, if it's your own deadline, you can easily miss it. But you'll see anyone that I haven't actually done. I've done a course with Curtis Brown Creative in the UK, but they're more of it's an agency-led creative course. But I've never done an actual writing course, as in teaching you how to write. That one's more teaching you about the industry, and you know, getting you to a publishable stage, if that's what it is. But I think you just have to put deadlines on yourself, and you have to I think the best thing I ever read, and I honestly don't know who it was. I think it might have been Neil Gaiman, or I don't know, someone who said the only difference between a published writer and an unpublished writer is the published writer finished their book.
Mm.
I love that because it's so true, because I've been there as well. You know, you research agents, you research editors, you think, oh, you know, would my book look nice there? But if you don't have a book to send an agent or an editor, you're never
What have you
going
got?
to stage. Yeah, so I don't think. And interestingly, with me, my only goal, once I got serious about this, my only goal was to get an agent. I honestly did not think, of course, you know, there was, oh, I want to get published, but that's kind of very, you know, arbitrary.
Broad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I ever wanted to do was get an agent, because once you have to get an agent, once you get an agent, because if they take a chance on you, they, you know, there's a chance basically of getting a deal. And they only take on, you know, a certain amount of clients and stuff. And so when I got my agent, I was then like, oh, right, okay, now there's another goal. And so then it moved from there. But I think you have to set yourself the first goal of sitting down and finishing the book. I mean, I think that's the only writing advice. And it's really funny because, of course, now that I've got a book out, I'm being asked for advice and things like that. And I just think I'm so unqualified to answer those questions because it's exactly what Neil Gaiman, or maybe it wasn't him, I don't know, whoever said, the only difference between me and someone who's writing but isn't published is that I finished. You know, that's, you know, you take away everything about talent and whatever and luck and all of that, but you've got to have the finished product.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And what was that journey like for you when you finished that manuscript and you went on the search for an agent? What kind of process was that like for you? And then, of course, them pitching you to publishing houses.
It's really hard to talk about my road to publication without, you know, breaking hearts of other aspiring or, you know, struggling writers, because I did.
I'll say everyone's is different. Everyone's story is different, I promise.
Because I had an absolute dream run, an absolute dream come true. But I'll preface that by saying I made it really easy for everyone along the line to say yes to me, because I did everything right, you know, even down to fonts and spacing and what they want, and, you know, spelling their name and all that sort of stuff. But so what happened was I did do this course with Curtis Brown Creative, who are, Curtis Brown is one of the top literary agencies in the UK. And they started a few years ago, they started a creative arm where they went out, and instead of waiting for people to send them, you know, millions of manuscripts a week, they decided they'd flip that on their head and go and sort of get talent and nurture the talent and then see what happens. I mean, they don't give you any promises or anything like that. But so I did this course with them and I got some really good feedback, but I still hadn't finished the book and all that sort of stuff. And it was a different book, to be honest. And then, so I spent a long time on the first book with them, which I did this, I did it online, actually. I was up in Cairns then. And then a couple of years after that, they had what they called a summer school in the UK, which was to go into their offices and spend a week with someone, just, you know, just workshopping all sorts of stuff. And I really wanted to do that. And it was an invitation that you had to have done their course before. And I wanted to do that because the real reason was because I really wanted to see what it was like inside a top literary agency. And all my dreams did come true, because while I was there, we were sitting in this sort of like a goldfish seminar room or whatever, and Barry Humphries walked in and we're all so it was quite funny. But so for that week, which was just going into the offices every week in Piccadilly and going in there and spending time with this amazing tutor, and we had to have we had to have something that we were going to work on. And I'd thought of the characters of Norman and Sadie, and actually on the plane on the way over to the UK, I thought, I'm going to start I'm not going to do the story that I was doing before. I'm not taking that in. I'm a bit sick of that. And so I wrote an outline for what turned out to be a funny thing about Norman Foreman. So I did that course. That was it. And when I came to, on that particular week, I met some of the agents. They did a little, cocktail party. And again, they won't, that they do the opposite than promise you, but they say this is just get a feel for what the industry's like and all the rest of it. And we had to do a pitch to agents on a table, and I just completely made monstrous of that. But my agent, who is my agent, we'll skip forward to the happy story, who is my agent now, she said she remembered me, and she said no, she said I could tell you were nervous, but it was such an adorable story. But anyway, I already knew who she was, and I'd already researched her very thoroughly, because that's a very important thing to do, is to get an agent. Just because one agent says no to you doesn't mean your book's not great. It just means that they can't get behind it because it's not their thing. And so that's your first point of thing, is to, so, and I'd already researched her, and I knew that she would be the one that I would want, but it's kind of a bit pie in the sky, because she's, you know, she's very well known and well respected, and a fantastic agent. And so at this little cocktail party after we had our thing, I said, oh, you know, would you mind if I pitched to you when I'm finished? And she said, oh yes, it sounds adorable, please do. And really I'd written about 2 chapters, or if that then. And so I went away and wrote it, fast forward another 4 years or whatever it was. And I sent it to her. And then I sat back to wait, because I read enough and been in enough writing circles to know that you have to sit back and wait for 3 to 6 months to even get a response, and all the rest of it. And I did, and like, as I was saying at the beginning, I did everything right to, you know, the font size and point and everything. And I made it really, was very careful to, when I submitted it to her, that it was on a particular time, because you never submit to agents when the London book fair's on, because that's their biggest, and the Hamburg one are the 2 biggest times of the year, and they're just flat out and nothing gets seen, and, you know, your email will get lost. So I knew I was sending it before that, well before that, and I was all excited. Anyway, so I did it, and that was great. And then I got, about 2 days later, I got an email from her, and I was like, oh my gosh. And she said, I've just started reading. I absolutely love it. I just wanted to say I'm going to finish it as quickly as I can, but we're flat out this week because it's the London Book Fair. So I kind of, and I was like, because they'd moved it earlier. So I sent it at the exact wrong time.
Oh.
Like, I couldn't have sent it at a worse time, because I didn't know they'd moved it forward a month instead. I always thought it was always in March or April. Anyway, they moved it forward that year. And anyway, then within a couple of, she said, I'm going to read it as fast as I can, you know, on the weekend, and she read it. And within, I think it was probably within 4 days altogether, she rang me and she made me an offer of representation. It was just like, absolute, had never expected anything like that. And then I worked with her. She's really well known for working with her clients editorially, and we did a few things, and it wasn't very much. It was just, I can't even remember what there was a couple of structural things, and so she said, to send it out in the best possible shape. And then when she sent it out, she sold it there was an auction, because there was a few people interested, and she sold it within another couple of days. So it was amazing. It is an absolute dream. And it was to Transworld, which is, we would probably have been my dream publishers anyway as well. They're part of Penguin Random House, which is why it's with Penguin Random House in Australia. And and there's a couple of international deals as well and stuff. And so it's been a complete dream come true. So I'm assuming that all the rejections and sadness and grief that comes with being a writer is yet to come for me. So
well, I think that's a good thing about having an agent, is once you've secured them, they're the ones that receive that, not you.
Yes, well, that's true. So hopefully, and I honestly, I do just think it is one of those pinch me things. Like, I can't believe she's my agent, and plus she's such a nice person, and I can't believe I'm with Transworld and Penguin Random House and this and that and the other. I can't believe any of it. But yeah.
Well, I think you're right. That is absolutely a dream run. I've heard similar ones where someone just knew of someone and they were like, well, we'll just send it off to them. Here's their email address, just send them off, tell them I sent you. And they're like, yep, we're buying it. So there have been similar stories.
Yeah. And there's definitely got to be an element of luck in it, I think, as to who sees it, who in the office. So, the agents that have readers and things, Sue, my agent, doesn't, she has an assistant, but she doesn't have a reader. So she does all her reading, and she's something like, I think it's like 150 manuscripts a week.
Wow.
And she takes on, she takes on like 5 to 6 clients a year. And she is just constantly reading. But there's an element of, if you're sending it to an agent of, maybe what's going on in their day that day, or, will they read it now? Will they read it if their readers are reading it, what sort of day are they having, but I think that's great story. Like if someone could pass it on, I think that's absolutely fine. And it's not unfair or anything like that, because they still wouldn't get an offer unless it was a fantastic book. So
Exactly.
all for that. If I knew someone, I'd use them as well. So,
and that's, I mean, I've got a few friends who are authors locally on the Mornington Peninsula, and they've said to me, they've been published in children's picture books and come up with this idea, and their agent has said that is the most amazing idea. I love it, but I've just taken one on that's almost the same. But let me pitch it for you to all these other people because I want you to have it published, but I can't take it on.
Yeah.
We know what you're doing is amazing, and it's just timing, and that's the luck in it. It's the timing. It's has the same publishing house just printed something or about to print something that's of the same theme or genre, or they've already got their 3 chick lit for the year, whatever it might be. It's just, I find it interesting when some of the publishing houses do their weekly call outs or their monthly call outs, and they'll say, but we're not taking sci-fi at the moment, autobiographies or children's picture books, because they're done. They've got so many already that they don't need anything new. So you've got to wait for the next year.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've got a friend in the UK who's written an absolutely amazing book, and his agent hasn't been able to sell it in the UK. And he sent me a few of his, rejections, and they're heartbreaking because everyone, without a doubt, says this is beautiful. The writing is beautiful, but I can't take it on because it's very similar to da da da. And his agent has managed to sell it, or his foreign rights agent has sold it to, I don't know, somewhere like Holland and maybe, I don't even know, Italy or something like that. So he's got deals over there, but he can't get a British deal because his book is too similar to what they're, and of course it's not similar as in the plot similar, but it's
no, it's just themes.
Yeah.
And I must say though, my biggest, it's very whimsical what I'm about to say, but the timing is always right. So no matter what we want, it's going to be right. And I know for my friend who's just had hers published earlier this year, she's waited 7 years from the time of signing a contract to it actually being published because something else came out from another publishing house. So we'll hold off for a little bit longer, or, whatever it was, there was always something. And then COVID hit as well when it was about to be published, but it's gone out and it's now considered, it's about to become a bestseller. So because the timing was just right. And they knew, the publishing houses and the agents, they knew what they were doing. And I think that's half the battle, is letting go and just trusting.
Yeah, they do, because they know exactly who's publishing on, the 5th of January. Mine was here. And mine was actually, it would have been incredibly quick in publishing terms for me when, from the time that I signed my contract to when it came out, because originally it was going to be, which is fairly standard. I think it was 14 months of the lead time. And then they changed it, and it was supposed to be out in July last year. And, because they wanted it out for summer. And then it's been changed various times, obviously because of COVID. And I just keep hearing this, it's the perfect book for our times. It's perfect. And because it's uplifting and everything. And now it's getting more and more perfect the longer they hold off. It's worse and worse of times. They need more laughter over there. So I'm currently, and they canned it from, they were also doing January as it was here. And then they said, no, we're going to be locked down in January. So we're moving. I mean, they're probably still going to be locked down in April. Who knows? But, as it turns out, it was great. But it's a long and involved process. But, people will need uplifting even more in April in the UK, I feel. And the US, it's out in the US in April as well. So that's
exciting.
And that's what I'm seeing. It's the perfect book for our times. It's the perfect book for our times. It's like,
Could you just get it out there? Thanks.
Before things start looking good again.
But you know what? They are right, because as much as, we're not all going to go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, it's a very relatable book. So the issues that Sadie comes across as a parent, they're relatable. As an older person in society with loved ones, with Leonard, it's relatable. And kids aren't going to read this, but can I say, I've had it on the audiobook in the car, and we were in the car for a couple of hours the other day, and I turned it off for something else. I think I took a phone call or something. And when I went back to it, my daughter, who's 6, said, can we put the book back on, please? Because it's a nice book. There's no voices raised. There's no swearing. I don't think. I can't remember any swearing.
Well,
But
there is a couple of swearing.
there might be a little bit, but it's not significant. It's not a sweary book. And she liked the different voices. She liked the characters. And I didn't realize she was actually getting into the book. So
A lady read it, a friend of a friend, and contacted my friend and said, you should tell her to get it on the something educational curriculum for old school children. And I said, oh, well, there's swearing in it. And she said,
oh, that's fine.
The kids probably swear. So I've actually had a couple of people then since her say, I think someone contacted me. I can't even think now. Someone said something to someone about it being on the, in for older school kids. And I never thought about that. I'd never thought about writing for any age children, but really, I mean, if you're 17, you could probably cope with it.
Yeah, and when you think about it, now that you've said that, because English analysis was actually one of my favorite things to do in VCE, this would be the perfect book because the characters are so diverse. They've got their own storylines going on that you could take beyond. I like at the end when we go from the second last chapter to the last chapter, I was a bit like, oh, I wanted to see the performance. I wanted to see that, but we don't need to.
Yeah.
And I liked where it went. There are so many angles that could be covered in a proper VCE English analysis. So I actually completely agree. And I wouldn't say that about a lot of books. They're enjoyable, but this has so many elements to it that I think would actually lend itself really well to that.
It's good to know. It's good. I mean, I think too, and I think I'll always do this, but I think why you mentioned it being relatable, I think it's relatable because all those characters are any of us. And I think that's, my thing has always been that I just like to write about ordinary people, but they're in extraordinary situations, extraordinary challenges. And I think you can sort of project any of those characters onto yourself or people that and you go, oh, because in real life, hopefully all that bad stuff wouldn't happen to a poor 12-year-old boy. I'm sure it does.
It does happen, and that's
worse probably. But you can relate to it because you can see, gosh, if that kid can get over that, well then what am I worrying about? I can get over stuff. So I think people like those kind of human stories where they can see themselves in it, and I think that's what's behind the genre uplit, which is fairly recently named.
I was going to say, what do we put this in? Like, I couldn't really. It's not a chick lit. It's not. This could literally be read by anybody.
I would have called it contemporary fiction.
Yep.
I'm really rubbish on genres. That was one of the things I spent many years worrying about before I'd even written a book, like trying to understand genres. You could call it anything, but it's been called by most people uplit, and I had never even heard of uplit until my book started. It's like they're putting it in the same genre as Eleanor Oliphant, can't even say her name, and A Man Called Uva, which I always pronounced as A Man Called Ove until only a couple of weeks ago when I found out it was Uva. Does everyone know? Anyway.
I was today old when I found that out.
I was only 4 weeks ago old before I found that. And I thought, God, how many people have I said it to? But yeah, it's Uva.
They probably didn't know either. It's fine.
But that's the sort of book that it's been put with because it's uplift, uplift. It's obviously easy to work out.
I absolutely agreed with the marketing. I was being told it was somewhere between Little Miss Sunshine and Mamma Mia. And while I'm not a massive fan of Mamma Mia, for me, Little Miss Sunshine, I could completely see how it's similar in its genre. And I know I'm not going to give away anything for Little Miss Sunshine because that's not what this is about. But I remember in that movie, because I haven't read the book, but in the movie, you've got a kid who wants to be a pilot. And then along in the storyline on their road trip, he discovers that he's colorblind and he can't be. And that's a perfectly normal thing to find out. It's just that this family has so many of them, the same as what Norman and Sadie do. So I thought it was just a normal real life kind of story. It's just really enjoyable. I don't know any other way of explaining it. Really enjoyable.
And it's hopeful. I think that's the key, whether you can put your finger on it or not. I think, and I can because I've been speaking to people and that's what they're saying back to me, is that it's got hope. And not necessarily. There's not hope in every story, but I think that's the sort of book I like to read, whether it's a bad ending or a really happy ending. It doesn't have to be a happy ending for me, but you do have to have that sense of, a change from the beginning to the end. Otherwise, what's the point? And that there's some glimmer of hope, unless it's a complete, absolute monstrosity where everyone dies.
Yeah.
No hope, and they can be just as good as well. But for me personally, I like that little glimmer of hope, no matter how small it is. And
I'd say hope and growth in yours. There's a lot of growth for every character in this book, which I really, really enjoyed. Now, I'd like to know, what is your advice to any aspiring authors who might be watching this today?
See, I told you, people starting to ask me.
I know, standard question.
Obviously, the first cliched one, which is to sit down and write. My favorite piece of advice, or one of my favorite pieces of advice, isn't original to me, but it's really, I don't know, it not opened my eyes, but it was like a ping moment, like a light bulb, was that somebody famous, can't remember who, said, write for your characters, don't write for your audience.
Yep.
So, don't write thinking you're going to be published and, I'm going to be the next whatever, Harry Potter or whoever's the latest thing, next Norman Foreman.
Yes.
Write for your characters. And I think too, that's I put my finger on that when I found some characters that, you've got to spend 90,000 words with them, or 100,000 or 150 if you're really good. You've got to spend months, years with them. You've got to be able to really love your characters and be able to take them forward. And I think that was with Sadie and Norman, I had more of a motivation to keep going than to stop, because I really felt for them, like people that read it feel like, you're sort of going, oh, come on, you're egging them on. I was kind of doing that as well. So I think that it's really important to find yourself, a story that you love, because you don't want to get bored. I mean, I've been bored with stories before, which is why they're not finished and why they're still sitting there. I think if you find that one that you're able to spend lots and lots of time with, and so basically just sit down and write. And the same, I mean, writing advice is, a lot of it's cliched for a reason, because it's absolutely true. And, another piece of writing advice is just don't worry about how bad your first draft is, because no one else is going to see it. Just get the story out and then go back to finesse everything and make it work. Doesn't matter if it doesn't work, put a note in going, come back here, and that's how I'm writing at the moment. I'm writing my second book, and I've got notes everywhere in them in big red, I type in red going, got to fix this, or how would this happen? No, this is bad, but let's go back. So that, but also, again, another piece of cliched but very, very helpful advice is just read and read and read and read. And it's not because I remember saying to someone once years ago, no, I haven't read for ages because I'm trying to write. And that's a complete rookie mistake. And when I think of myself saying it now, I thought, how could I have thought that was true? Because you're reading not to steal anyone's ideas or get inspiration, I suppose. But if you read, you can see what you don't like, you can see what you think doesn't work, and you can also see the general. Structure's a word that, when as a writer, it's like, what does it? For me, I can't speak for anyone else. They might be a little cleverer than me. When I hear the word structure, I'm like, what does that even mean? It's just like, how can you get that wrong? Because you're telling your story, you know what you want to say. So I think it's really important to read other people's, and then you start to understand what structure is and why they put it in that way and why they've done this and how it works or how it doesn't work. And also just look at these beautiful stories that are out there, whatever book you read, and even bad books. I'm not one of those people that will stop a book. People say, life's too short to read bad books. I don't think so at all. I think if I start something, I'll finish it no matter what, because if it's really bad, I've learned a lot from that. Or sometimes when you think it's really bad, you change your mind. And I won't mention it because it's a very recent book, but I started this book that is everywhere, that everyone's just going, this is the best book since whatever. And I started it and I'm like, is it?
Is it a really thick book by any chance?
No.
Oh, okay, because I've got one that's a recent release, And I got halfway through it and I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand what the hype is about, and I've got to finish this. And I feel really awkward. And yeah.
It's actually a thin book. And I think the main thing was that it's been compared to something that I absolutely love. And I had to back up right from the start. I thought, really? It's nothing like that. And I still don't think it is. But after about halfway, I changed my mind completely. And now I really, really, well, I finished it now and I really, really enjoyed it. So I went back to the beginning bits and I'm just like, but that's what I've tried to work out is I think that it was that comparison that actually put me off. And I thought,
Okay.
for me, I don't think that did it any favors, but yeah, so I keep going, but even if it's the worst book in the world, I'll keep going until the very end. And especially now that I know how hard and how much effort it is and what a writer goes through to get to publication. I don't want to be corny, but I actually do think that you owe it to them. Like, the poor person, if you taken it out of the library, if you've bought it or whatever, and you've been moved enough to start it, I really think that it's nice if you finish it. But there's a lot of people that aren't like that, and they'll just throw it away if they don't like it. So, which is why it's very important to engage people on your first page, I guess, or first chapter at least.
Absolutely. That's it. You don't want to spend half the book scene setting.
No.
Set the scene and then get on with it.
Yes, exactly.
Now, what do you hope that readers will take away from The Funny Thing About Norman Foreman?
Oh, well, what we were saying before, I hope they take away a little bit of hope. And I hope, it's a terrible thing to say, I hope I make them cry. And
you did.
But I also hope I make them laugh. And I think it's because of everyone's different. Everyone likes, that's what makes the world go around. Everyone likes to read different stuff, listen to different stuff, watch different stuff. But for me, I love reading books that make you cry and then make you laugh. Like, my favorite authors are people like David Nichols and Nick Hornby and, Tim Winton, who can even make you laugh, even though he's not even trying to be funny, I think. But like Roddy Doyle, I don't know, just people that can, observers of life that can make an ordinary thing quite different. So that's what I would hope. I would hope people can see themselves in some of the characters. I hope they fall in love with the characters. And yeah, I just hope they have some hope. They take away a hopeful feeling. And I hope that's what I would like. I'd just like people to put it down. Like, I have one particular book that I loved so much. When I finished it, I was sitting in bed and I threw it across the room. And I was just doing the edits on this book, actually. And I threw it across the room and I said, why am I even bothering? Because it was so good. I'd quite like someone to do that. Please let me know.
That sounds good. You have made that fairly easy, I must say, because your writing style is so easy to read. It's so easy to follow. And there's no sort of having to go back a few paragraphs because you're not sure what, it's wonderful. I absolutely love your writing style. So well done.
Thank you.
Now, where can people find you online?
They can find me online at my website, which is woefully neglected because I'm trying to write my next book. It's
Priorities.
JuliettaHenderson.com. Mainly, and I'm really not a social media person, but I've had to become one, and I've narrowed it down to I am on Twitter, on Julietta Julia, I think. Julietta Julia 01, or if you just type in my name, it'll come up. And I do go on Twitter every couple of days, but I mainly spend most of my time on Instagram, and I'm Julietta Henderson author on Instagram. And I have a very cozy set of followers, all 300 of them. Something, but they're all people I like and know.
As long as they're engaged, that's all that matters.
And so that's where I'll be spending most of my time, because it's quite difficult to spend time on all, like Facebook I'm just rubbish at, and Twitter is very interesting. That's probably the most interesting social media platform, and you can follow some great people, and there's a lot of humor on Twitter, but it's very fast paced and it's very, I don't know, anyway, it's good, and there's a great bookie community, but Instagram is where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Julietta. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone for coming and giving up their time and coming to say hello.
Thank you. Now, the funny thing about Norman Foreman is available to borrow on audiobook, and you can pop that on reserve for collection at any of our libraries with your library membership. If you're not a Frankston City Libraries member, you can sign up straight away via our website. You can also purchase The Funny Thing About Norman Foreman online from Robertson's Bookshop, or they do have copies available right now in their Frankston store. Keep an eye on the Frankston City Libraries website for the great Frank Talks we have coming up. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Frank Talk with Julietta Henderson for Frankston City Libraries.